Okay, so we're looking at the third video on quadratic equations, and this technique is called completing the square. So in the previous video on factorizing, I said, well, all quadratic equations have to equal 0. So we would do, as our first step, x squared minus 4 equals 0. And then that's the difference of two squares, plus 2 minus 2 equals 0. And so the answers are minus 2 and plus 2, so it's plus or minus 2. Now what I want to show you is when that number, when you have a square there, you could actually do as your first step, okay, to get rid of a square, you square root. So the square root of x squared equals plus or minus the square root of 4. Now we have to put the plus or minus because we could have two answers. One could be, for instance, minus 2 squared equals 4 or plus 2 squared equals 4. So we know the answers are plus or minus, and to get the two answers we put plus or minus. Okay? So the square root of x squared, the square root and the square cancel out, plus or minus, and the square root of 4 is 2. So in actual fact, it's much quicker just to square root both sides rather than doing the factorizing method. So for instance, in this particular one, because we've got a square, we can just square root the other side. So the first line would be, when you square root a square, you just cancel out the square, and then you put plus or minus the square root of 9, which is plus or minus 3. So we've got x plus 3 equals plus or minus 3, and so the plus 3 goes across to the other side and becomes a minus 3. So plus 3 comes across and becomes a minus 3. But we have plus and minus in front, and so the two answers are plus 3 minus 3. So 3 minus 3 equals 0, and minus 3 minus 3 equals minus 6. Okay, I might just do another one just while I'm on this page. Say for instance we've got 2x minus 1 squared equals 16. So the first line would be 2x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 16, which is plus or minus 4. So 2x equals plus and minus 4, and then minus 1 becomes plus 1. And so 4 plus 1 is 5. Minus 4 plus 1 equals minus 3. And so divide through by 2. So the answer is 5 on 2 and minus 3 on 2. So when you have a perfect square, the quick way is just to square root the other side. So copy those down and then come across when you're ready. Okay, so let's just remind ourselves what a perfect square looks like. So if I'm going to use the expansion, the shortcut is a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. If you don't remember how to do that, then you would have, like, this is for a plus b squared, not for x plus 4. And if you can't remember that shortcut, then you'd have to do a plus b, and then use the FOIL method, but you'll end up with the same thing. So for x plus 4 squared, square the first, you square the last, which is the a squared and the b squared, and then to get the middle, you multiply the two numbers, and then double the result. So x times 4 is 4x, and you double it. So that's the short way of doing the expansion. Okay. In the second one, square the first, square the last, you get plus 25, and then multiply those two numbers to get minus 5x, and then you double it, and you get minus 10x. Okay. Now the reason I'm doing that is because when you look at that and the bracket, okay, to get the minus 5, you just halve the middle. To get the 4, you just halve the middle term. Okay, so that's what we're going to do, is going from this expression back to the bracket. Okay, so copy that down and I'll explain on the next few pages. Okay, so we've got a quadratic equation, x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. So using like the first video or the second video, the old-fashioned way would be plus 4 plus 2 equals 0. 4 2s are 8, 4 plus 2 is 6, and so the two answers are minus 4 and minus 2. So we know those are the answers. But in the completing the square technique, x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0, okay, this is what the bracket is going to be determined by the 6x. The 8's not going to be important. So this is the way I would like to show it to you. So we've got x squared plus 6x equals minus 8. Just move the 8 across the other side. So that is still the same equation. And then, okay, so you look at that 6 and then you halve it. So the reason you halve it is because you halve the minus 10 to get the minus 5, or you halve the 8 to get 4. So that's why we're going to halve it. So when you halve that, the bracket will end up being x plus 3 squared. So there's a number, okay, so it still equals minus 8. So the number here that's missing would be 3 squared. So we don't have the 9. Okay, do you understand? This 8 went across to become minus 8, and there was a space here, but we need 3 squared to equal 9 to get your a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. Now I've added 9, I've just made up a 9, so to keep the balance I just have to add 9 on that side, and then the two 9s keep the balance. But now x squared plus 6x plus 9 is x plus 3 squared, and minus 8 plus 9 equals 1. Okay, now we know the answers are minus 4 and 2, so let's see if we can get those two answers. So x plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 1, and the square root of 1 is 1. So x equals plus or minus 1, and then plus 3 becomes minus 3, and then 1 minus 3 is minus 2, minus 1 minus 3 is minus 4, and I'm sure they were our two answers. Okay, so it looks like a laborious technique, but it actually has a lot of advantages in later mathematics for this technique. Okay, but if you had to choose a method, then obviously you just do the factorizing method, but the completing the square is a really, really good technique. So we're going to do another couple of examples, so copy that and come across. Okay, so we've got x squared minus 4x minus 5. So the minus 5 don't worry about, it's this term here that's going to be the important thing. Okay, so the first thing we do is move the 5 across, so minus 5 becomes plus 5. Now I've got a space here, and I'm going to, whatever I add, I'm going to add on that side. So you halve minus 4, so the bracket will be minus 2 squared. Okay, so half of minus 4 is minus 2, so that goes inside the bracket. Now this number here that's missing is, what's minus 2 squared? And the answer is plus 4. So I add 4 on that side, and then 5 plus 4 is 9. And now we are, now I'll save time, the square root of 9 equals 3. So it's plus or minus 3, and then minus 2 becomes plus 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. Minus 3 plus 2 is minus 1. And there's your answers, which you could have got by factorizing x minus 5, x plus 1. So you would have got plus 5 and negative 1. But this is completing the square. Okay, copy that and come across, and we'll do a non-monic. Okay, so we've already done this in one of the earlier videos. So the answers are 2x plus 1, x plus 3. So we know the answers, if we're using other techniques, were those two answers. So let's try with the completing the square method. So we take, now because there's the 2 out the front, we've got to take the 2, and we've got x squared plus half of 7, which is 7 on 2, plus half of 3, which is 3 on 2, equals 0. So that's the first step. Okay. Now, to get this 2 to go away, we divide both sides by 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 0 divided by 2 is still 0. So that's our quadratic now. Okay. But we had to divide through by 2 to change these numbers. Okay, so the next step is x squared plus 7 on 2x, and then plus 3 on 2 becomes minus 3 on 2. Okay. So there's a space there for a number, which I'm going to also put there. Okay, so the bracket is halve that number. So half of that number, half of 7 on 2 is going to be 7 on 4. So that's going to be the perfect square. Okay, so half of, before we halve 8 or halve minus 4, here halving a fraction. It's photo day today. Okay, so 7 on 2 becomes 7 on 4, so that's the bracket. And to get the missing number, you square that number. So 7 squared is 49, and 4 squared is 16. So the number we're adding is 49 and over 16. Now on your calculator, you'll do it. So we're adding those two numbers. So 16 3s are 48. That's negative 48. Negative 48 plus 49 is 1. And actually, no, it's not going to be right. Sorry, beg your pardon. Yeah, we're changing the denominator to 16. That's right. So I'll start again. So I forgot about the 2. So the lowest common denominator is 16. So I've got to multiply that by 8. So it's going to be minus 24 plus 49 over 16. Minus 24 plus 49 is 25 over 16. Nearly made a mistake. And so that's that bracket there equals that number there. Now you'll just chuck that on your calculator. Don't be too worried how I've done it. You'll just chuck it on your calculator and get that answer. And so x plus 7 on 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 25 is 5. The square root of 16 equals 4. So that's the fraction. And so x equals plus and minus 5 over 4, and then plus 7 on 4 becomes minus 7 on 4. Okay, so the fractions are 4s. Okay, plus 5 minus 7 is minus 2. Minus 5 minus 7. Minus 5 minus 7 is minus 12. And so the answers are minus a half and minus 3, which was the answers back up the top. Okay, so the non-mnemonics are a little bit harder, but the technique keeps working. Okay, that's it. Thanks. Bye.